Mark Thompson back on the conversation with Tamara Tolles O'Loughlin, and I want to talk all about water with you. You're an advocate for people and the planet and for sustainability, and there's so many different developments in all of these areas. You're the North American director at 350.org. I wonder if we could just start by explaining what that organization is.
Sure. So 350.org are the folks that have brought you all of the big marches. So climate strikes in 2019, 7.6 million folks in the street. That was us being supportive of youth strikers all over the world who wanted to make this real. Before that, 2017, there was a great march on climate that really put communities facing impacts first. So we've been around since about 2009. But in general, our work is about mobilizing, organizing people, and getting them into the streets to revoke the social license of fossil fuel capitalists.
Well, there's a lot to this, and it is certainly the case that disadvantaged communities are additionally disadvantaged or first disadvantaged by policies that favor toxic, polluting, and I would suggest policies that create absolute madness when it comes to managing natural resources and exploiting natural resources for the sake of exploitation over habitat. But all of that said, I wonder if you can give me a real sort of granular look at what that really means.
What does it mean for capitalism to turn everything into a fire sale? Let's see, air quality, water quality. The only reason we're not being sold air in containers is because most of it's been poisoned. The only reason we're not being sold soil by the bag, oh wait, we are, is because the folks that we've allowed to poison it have made it a commodity to sell things to us that should be free. So this latest move, which has been brewing for about 2 years to turn water into a saleable commodity that can be indexed and resold and repackaged, is really going to make it more expensive to have clean, healthy water. There's been a lot said about it. Mostly that farmers will largely use it to offset the failure of insurance that should have supported them because of climate change. So as folks experience uncontrollable weather, are dealing with fire, have soil that's been polluted by chemicals that were freely available to them on the market, people are then having to compete for natural resources, and being able to bet against yourself to make money is unfortunately the American way. So we're pitting people who need water against basic life resources and predicting that it'll be harder to get by 2025.
And what you're talking about is the trading of water as a commodity. I mean, this is a new, you say it's been a couple of years now, and it's been anticipated for some time, right? But it's now here and in a real way. Water is being traded as a commodity.
Yeah, it's been floated since about 2018. The financial markets have finally found a vehicle to put it in a few places. The end of the day, normally when you trade something on the stock market, gold or silver or metals of any kind, it usually isn't a life-sustaining natural resource. But in focusing on the idea that you can start the California Water Index, which was launched about 2 years ago, we're betting that it's going to be harder to get clean water, even though most of the planet is covered with it, and betting on building a market so that people can fight for it in a place where most people won't even realize it's missing before the aquifers they go to are empty, are depleted. The salt water that's around everywhere costs money to be ported around. So putting it on the market and saying that you can put your dollar down to get access to it is another trick. It's like the big water short.
Do you think that when it comes to sustainability and in the case of water, the availability, you think that we've just sort of gotten fat and happy with the fact that we've always gotten water out of the tap? There's just a sense, I think, of kind of taking these resources for granted.
I don't know that we're taking them for granted. There are people all over the world working for less than $1 a day. The idea that we can turn water into a tradable commodity that puts financial institutions and investors in the front seat for getting access to something that we all need to survive is a predictable pattern of creating scarcity. It makes it harder for us to have a thing that literally flows through the water table. Anybody who's ever been through grammar school or grade school knows that the water table is a thing that we all have access to. The poisoning that could make it a commodity is actually a thing we're all paying for. The fact that we would double down and pay for it is really gross. The fact that there are contracts that people would underwrite for it is even more upsetting. The fact that people knowing climate change is going to continually impact them and can't get insurance to cover basic things that could happen and have to bet against themselves in the stock market and the bond market should be even more offensive. I don't know that we've gotten fat and happy. A lot of the world is skinny and thirsty. So this seems really greedy.
And you're right. I think I'm speaking about our culture in America. So I guess what I was speaking of specifically as a setup was when it comes to growing some kind of popular movement in this country, America. I wonder if people yet feel the shoe pinching for them when it comes to water.
I know that there are communities that have been fighting Nestle, that have been fighting Poland Spring, that have been fighting people for at least a decade to stop challenging them for a right to the water in their aquifers. So even in the US, where we have been able to buy bottled water, people laughed at that when in the era of acid rain, when we were in the ozone layer acid rain part of the environmental industrial complex, we were in a position where we thought people will never buy water, it's everywhere. That being said, ask communities in Flint if they could make it if it wasn't for bottled water. Ask communities in the Appalachia if they could make it if mountaintop removal didn't make the soil that pours into the aquifers make the water poisonous. So I actually think for the few fat and happy people, they don't represent most of us.
Wow. Well, I mean, very well said, of course. I'm wondering then what you see as the answer. I mean, obviously you have marshaled tremendous popular support for a movement. How do you push back on these huge corporate entities to which you refer?
I think one thing we have to do is stop letting them hide in shame about our individual behavior. The biggest trick that's ever been pulled off in the US is the idea that your individual carbon footprint, your individual contribution as someone who drives a car that was given to you by the poor transportation system we have in most places, the fact that you could feel personally guilty about what you're doing to fail to help the planet is a continuing fiction that destroys people's lives and keeps them from focusing on the fact that 71% of the things we could do to save the planet all involve fossil fuel corporations getting their way and putting polluters over people.
Yeah, so your point is, hey, look, you can make all the changes in your life that you want, and until these corporate entities are representing real change and sustainability on their part, the ball ain't moving down the field.
Yeah, I mean, I think I am a vegetarian. I'm super psyched. If everybody else had started with Meatless Monday, that would make me feel personally better. Is it gonna slow down the train? No. Food agriculture is a big part of what can be done, but it's not bigger than just stopping the business that has rolled over our communities that we pay money to when we lose resources, and then again for the services that they decided for us that we need to buy from them. So I do think that shifting the narrative from personal responsibility to the big polluters that can cut emissions, save lives, and stop betting against us, even when it comes to the stock market. I feel like I don't know if we could say the words jump the shark to enough people if we're in a place where we're bidding for things that fall out of the sky. Like water is a part, the water table is one of the first things you learn about. If we're in a position where we're bidding against one another to not be poisoned, we've already lost. So yeah, it's pretty grimy.
Well, you mentioned California along the way and some of the stuff you've written and talked about. And California, of course, is experiencing another year of drought. I mean, I think there's been a de facto drought since 2011. But California certainly is in a position to understand the scarcity of water. And yet, your point on water falling from the sky and the water cycle and all of that, the water rights regulations in California, you need a team of lawyers to understand them. And that has been in a situation that's been exploited by corporations. You mentioned Nestle. They used to just stick a pipe in the ground and pump water out, right? And then they'd resell that water as whatever, Aquafina or whatever the brand is. How to negotiate some of that, the legal side? I think you have a legal background as well. I'm just curious how that works into this fabric of change.
I think that we have long lost the conversation around natural resources and access to water. The concept of riparian rights, I can tell you on behalf of our indigenous partners and my indigenous family members, it is really gross to talk about what it means to have access to water as a right of and in order to have the rights of a thing that should belong to everybody from the core of the earth to the top of the sky. Those are things that we've invented as legal fictions, that you own a piece of property in your life in perpetuity, you potentially could pass that on. If it happens to be in front of water because you fought and killed someone else to get it, because the government handed it over to you after they fought and killed someone, it feels pretty gross to say the water in front of your house is yours and it doesn't belong to everybody because it flows from one place to another and is in fact community property. So I do think California has a lot to say about water. Arizona has a lot to say about water. Nevada and the entire fiction that is Las Vegas and really should not exist. If we cared about water, we'd be paying attention to the agreements we made a long time ago to ship it from the desert to the desert. So I do think that we've been in this game for a while, and there's some really great media documentaries and books about all the water and land rights deals we've made, so that you have to go through this political football where you need to be escorted by a lawyer to understand whether or not you have access to not dying every day.
Wow, so well said. You know, the unmitigated exploitation of resources on this planet is an ongoing horror. And I love even just the offhanded references, as you've made as asides, to indigenous populations and to natural resources that we should all have a stake in, and that we've seen vanish in one way or another, poisoned or otherwise diminished. Can't wait to talk to you again. Thank you so much for joining us today on The Conversation.
Doing our best. Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.